service.
Great.
Looks like it's recording. That's great. Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Wonderful.
Hey.
So, hello, everybody. Welcome to Webinar 4 of JELI Cohort 2, the Jewish Experiential Leadership Institute. For those of you just signing on, you might be a little confused that I'm listed as Mark Young, and actually Joy is listed as the Davidson Graduate School of Jewish Education. We're all partners here, as we'll talk about today. But I get on around an hour before we start the webinar to make sure everything's set up and we're all good to go. Some of you sign on early. And then we had a fire drill. And that fire drill at JTS turned out to be a small fire, perhaps in the library. We're not sure, but there was about 6 fire trucks here, and was calling Joy at 12 o'clock saying, okay, we got to figure out something. So Joy was fantastic in setting this together. True model of our partnership here, and we're starting pretty much on time. So what a great segue into sharing leadership, the Joshua model. We'll talk about both Moses and Joshua models and different models of sharing leadership, as Kenneth Brander in the JELI talk shared with us, and your comments on the Google site were really fantastic, as Joy will facilitate that conversation in a bit. We're first going to hear from Adam Kaskin and his Devar Torah. Joy will then frame our discussion. We're going to get some of your insights as part of a group discussion. We do have a short breakout in partners that we're going to do, and coming up with some golden rules or commandments of sharing leadership. We're going to debrief that a little bit, and then go into a closing discussion and take the last 15 minutes or so to talk about logistics, because we're all going to be together in Birmingham in less than 2 weeks. So with that, I'm going to start with a poll, just so we can get our blood flowing with our topic for today and our JELI talk. And many of you addressed this in your Google site comments. But I want to open the poll, and would like to ask you, what type of leadership do you typically emulate? Are you, and forgive the vernacular, totally a Moses, mostly a Moses, but sometimes a Joshua? The other way? Are you a real mix of the two that depends on the situation, or are you really a Joshua? So just to get a sense of where you think you are on the, not to say it's a spectrum per se, they're just two of probably many miles of leadership. But just to get us thinking about where we are and where we might be at the end of this conversation and at the end of JELI. So I'll give you a few more seconds to do that. I see just a few more people need to answer. Great. I'll close the poll in exactly 18 seconds. And then you can see all of the results. I would say, getting an advanced look at the results, I'm not entirely surprised. But it's going to be a good conversation that we're going to have in a little bit. So the poll is now officially closed. And you should be able to see the poll results now. That the most choice was 7 folks chose mostly a Joshua, sometimes a Moses. But between that and a real mix of two, definitely a lot of us find ourselves kind of going back and forth. Only 1 mostly a Moses and 3 totally a Joshua. So we're going to talk about these ideas of sharing leadership beginning today. So we're going to call on our great cohort member from Schenectady, New York, where I believe, Adam, you shared it was snowing heavy again, so high that he can't see out of my window without standing up. Many of us are dealing with ridiculous amounts of snow. But why don't you fall on some Torah to us? And he's prepared a wonderful Torah that I'm going to put the text on, so you can read while he's delivering it. And Adam, unmute yourself, and over to you.
Can you hear me, Mark? And can everyone hear me?
Yes, and we
Great.
can see you.
Okay. This week's Torah portion follows last week's story of Moses coming down from Mount Sinai to discover the people had made an idol. He was furious and returned up the mountain to speak with God. After speaking with God, Moses gathers the people and said, "These are the things that the Lord commanded to make. 6 days' work may be done, but on the 7th day you shall have sanctity, a day of complete rest to the Lord. Whoever performs work thereon shall be put to death. You shall not kindle fire in any of your dwelling places on the Sabbath day." And Moses spoke to the entire community of the children of Israel, saying, "This is the word that the Lord has commanded to say." This is from Exodus chapter 35, verses 1 through 4. Moses delivered God's message in a very firm way as to give no wiggle room to the commandment. Moses' style of leadership was one of absolutes, no consideration of the situation. This style of leadership can be great for teaching that there are consequences for breaking rules, but can also lead to unrest. The Talmud addresses the issue of absolutes in a couple of places. Commenting on the biblical passage from Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 20, justice shall you pursue, the Talmud teaches, it has been taught. The first use of the word justice refers to a decision based on strict law, the second to a compromise. How so? For example, two boats meet on a river. If both try to pass at the same time, they will collide and both will sink. But if one makes way for the other, both can go through without incident. And this is from the Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Sanhedrin, page 32b. This conversation in the Talmud explores the room that exists for evaluating each situation and not going with absolutes. In addition, the Talmud states, Moses' motto was, let the law cut through the mountain. Aaron, Moses' brother, the high priest, however, loved peace and pursued peace and made peace between man and man. Surely, where there is strict justice, there is no peace, and where there is peace, there is no strict justice. Also from the Babylonian Talmud, Sanhedrin, page 6b. This is another example of how each circumstance is evaluated differently, and that you can use a leadership style to deal with people differently, but fairly, in order to achieve peace. Commentaries show the need to have rules while also handling each situation individually. We must evaluate the circumstances and why the rule was broken before we administer consequences in order to truly be just. In order to have a peaceful society, business, family, or whatever, we must look at all the circumstances before issuing a consequence. Strict laws with no wiggle room are not just laws and will lead to more problems. By examining each situation individually, you are able to temper strict justice with compassion. We must use thought and administer consequences that are just in order to have a peaceful society.
Adam, I want to give you a huge Kol Kavod, or Yasher Koach, which roughly translates to wonderful job, and all the respect to you for putting this fantastic Devar Torah together. And I think it raises specific issues of different styles of leadership that we've been exploring through JELI, and in terms of how we share leadership through how strict we are or how collaborative we are with looking at different situations. And I think you present a certain important thing to take away, that we should have thought in everything that we do, but that there's, I think, benefits and challenges whether we're strict or whether we're too accommodating to changing precedents. And I think this is a great launch to the conversation that we're going to have. And thank you also for going first and being our first JELI Cohort Fellow to be sharing your words of Torah with us. This will be posted on the Google site, as will all of your Devar Torah, so you can always have a chance to reference our learning. So with that, we're going to continue. I'm going to read this slide to introduce, and then I'm going to pass the baton back over to Joy. We're going to take a closer look at sharing leadership, which is really going to be an intro, as is the last 3 webinars, but this specifically will be an intro to many of our conversations in a couple of weeks in Birmingham. Being a leader is not a solo enterprise. Leaders, after all, need to have followers at some point in order to be leading, as Peter Drucker, management scholar, famously wrote, and we're going to come back to Drucker shortly. Similarly, all leaders have in some fashion other folks involved that will impact their own leadership style and success, whether it be a peer, lay leader, or lay committee, a colleague at a partner organization, even supervisors and subordinates can share in the leadership role and responsibilities. Certainly, for each of our JCC positions, there are multiple touch points with those of whom we can share our vision, management, and implementation. How do we share leadership effectively? What are the different styles, and what does our Jewish lens have to say about them? So our big idea, how we bring people along to our vision and style is essential to our success, and how we establish a shared vision with others and develop a collaborative model to achieve that vision, one that isn't exemplified through Moses or through Joshua. Might be the not-so-secret sauce, those are my words, that holds together the ideal recipe for leadership and community building in today's Jewish professional world and at our JCCs. So with that, I'll ask that you double-check to make sure your phone is muted, because I still hear some background from some folks, but also pass it over to Joy Bren-Richardson to be our facilitator today.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. And great job, Adam. Thank you so much for starting us off. I, too, hear some feedback, so I'm not sure if there's anybody that's got background music going or hasn't muted their phone. We're going to take a closer look at leadership, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the Eli talk that everybody watched on the computer. And I thought it was a very interesting way to take a look at the Moses and the Joshua paradigm. Rabbi Kenneth Brander was able to really tweak out different ways that he emphasized all about different leaderships. And the story he tells, whether it's the story about his wife and the woman that she banded together with to make improvements in medical testing and legislation, or whether it was his examples of Moses and Joshua, they all had things in common. And one of the things that they had in common was the need. The need, whether it was a tragedy or running from slavery or migrating to a new land, each one of them in his examples had a need. They all joined forces with each other, with others. They brought people along. The women and the mothers joined forces together. And Moses had God as his partner, but not necessarily the followers the way, we think of leaders that have followers. It was much more of a top-down kind of management. And certainly in the example of Joshua, where he had to lead the people across the river, he was collaborating with people so that together they would all embark on the process of getting across the river and entering the land of Israel. So by having all of these collaborators, we see how Joshua had less resistance from the followers that Moses had. So, Mark, I'm going to ask you to advance the slide. I'm not sure if I still have that ability to do it, but...
I just made you the presenter, but make me the presenter again so then I can do all that stuff for you. Sorry, I passed the baton too quickly. Pass it back, and then I'll do all that technical stuff.
It's actually pretty funny for everybody that's on the webinar. There's this little ball that you can actually, pass to the next person, and that makes them the presenter. So hopefully that has worked, and now Mark is the presenter, and he'll be able to forward the slides for me. So you see in this slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about what would you say are the main attributes of Moses' leadership style, and what would you say are the main attributes of Joshua's leadership style? So individually think about that, and we're going to have one or two people talk about Moses' style, and one or two people talk about Joshua's style. So raise your hand if you have an idea about Moses' leadership style and want to share with us. And then we will call on you.
I'll also take notes.
Okay. I don't see anybody's hand raised yet. Adam has his hand up. Adam, can you unmute yourself and tell us about Moses' leadership style?
Well, Moses' leadership style was much more clear-cut. There was very room for discussion, if any at all. Translating it to more modern day, it's more of a necessity in true crisis situations when people just need to follow someone and without questioning do what needs to be done. Can be seen in the military quite a bit. This style of leadership at times is the appropriate style of leadership. But in day-to-day living might not be the most appropriate style of leadership, as it leaves, like I said, little room for discussion.
Right. Excellent. And in your Devar Torah, you talked about that it leaves no room for wiggle room. And I think that's exactly it. When there needs to be a top-down directive given, like you said, in crisis, absolutely. Who else wants to talk about leadership style of Moses? I see Deborah Rothschild's hand up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I see it as, because I was originally a child development major, that there's three different types of, or styles of raising kids. And I see Moses as the authoritarian, whereas I see Joshua more as the authoritative. And then, of course, there's the permissive, which is not in this leadership model.
Can you just explain a little bit about each one of those so that we can get a better understanding?
Yeah, well, in my child development classes, they talked, research and outcome as far as the different types of parenting styles. And the authoritarian is very much like, it's this way because I said so, and there's no discussion about it. Whereas authoritative, there's rules, but there's also a small example, a child has a curfew or a teenager has a curfew, but they know what the curfew is, but they're asking for an extension because they have to drive somebody home or there's a reason, and so there's a discussion about it.
That's a great way to differentiate between the two. Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to tell us about Moses? How about somebody telling us about Joshua and Joshua's leadership style? I saw Carol's hand up.
Yes. So I feel like Joshua is much more of a round table leader, like King Arthur. And decisions come more group-based and what's best for the team-oriented leadership.
Okay. I like the round table scenario. That's good.
Also, in terms of taking taking a village, that's Joshua. It takes a village is Joshua.
Right. Good. Okay. Who else has something to think about or tell us about with Joshua's style? Jeremy?
Yeah, I think Joshua's style was also, he was, I think, in more strategic situations. So I think he had to take on that style of involving others around him, that even if he knew what he wanted the ultimate decision or outcome to be, that he knew he had to have other people around him supporting him, because he was in situations that it wasn't just, leading people who, for the first time, in generations, were finding that they could make their own decisions. This was now, they've gotten used to the idea of we can make our own path at this point. So he knew that he had to lead them in a certain direction, but he also knew that he needed the support of those around him to be able to get it done.
Right. Very good. Thank you. And how about Lynn? What would you like to tell us about Joshua's style?
I don't know if it's just me, and I'd be curious to hear if other people feel this way, that Moses' style is what first comes to mind when I hear the term or hear the word leadership. I certainly appreciate and acknowledge, and I think Joshua's leadership style has all sorts of advantages and benefits. But when the topic of leadership comes up, Moses' style is the first that comes to mind for me.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think it may be more a more traditional style, a more patriarchal style. I think, I don't know.
Does somebody have a thought on what Lynn just raised? I see Jennifer's hand up.
Yeah, I was thinking, I actually agree with Lynn. I think maybe, I don't know if it's American society or if this happens in other societies, but kind of our image of the leader of the nation or of an organization is like this big, strong guy who's, leading the charge, telling people giving the vision, and then people, support and follow. And maybe it's changing, but I think definitely it seems to me like if you look in movies and if you look in popular culture, that's the image. And I think in boardrooms, it's very true. Most CEOs are men, and most leaders of big businesses are men. So I agree with her very much.
I'm actually wondering, it's interesting that you say that they're most men. I think that a woman can probably also have a top-down leadership style like Moses does, but tend not to. And if we look at gender relationships and how men form relationships and how women form relationships, women are much more engaging. They also, care what everybody else in the room thinks and gives everybody an opportunity to speak, where that doesn't always happen in in the studies with men. So I'm wondering, I think you both bring up a good point about how when we think of a leader, we might automatically go to that top-down Moses way of thinking. Doesn't always mean that it's the right way, but as Adam has shared with us, sometimes it's very necessary. I think we're going to move on to the next slide, and we're going to talk about modern examples of Moses' leadership style and modern examples of Joshua's leadership style. And again, I'm going to ask you to think about what comes to mind when you think about a modern example of a leader like Moses. Can you name somebody, or can you tell us about a situation? And I'm going to also remind you, after you speak, put yourself back on mute, okay? So raise your hand if you'd like to tell us some thoughts about a leadership style that's more modern.
I see Jennifer Zislis' hands up, I think, if Joy.
Okay, great. Jennifer. Jennifer Z, are you there?
I am. My hand wasn't up, but that's okay. I think for Moses, I still think of like old Russia and having a leader that, I'm drawing a blank, having a leader that just does not involve anyone. And so I think of all of the leaders in the world that are not democratic, and I'm drawing a blank on the words, so I apologize because I was working on it, and can you get back to me?
Okay, but we get the idea about more of a dictator kind of leadership versus a democratic.
Looking at, so yeah.
And I'm sure that there's plenty of countries that we can still point to that do have that dictator leadership model versus a democratic voting majority.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else want to tell us something about a modern leader? Rochelle, I see your hand up, Rochelle.
Yeah, so we have this community leader in town that part of his influence is due to his financial impact in the community, but he's very much this is what I think we should do, and everyone needs to do it, and you kind of don't really even get an opportunity to talk about how you might change it, or how he could differ, or how he might change the timeline, or anything, because he's very much like shoving everybody down this path. And I mean, there's no question about the fact that he's a leader in our community. He's got other names for some of us, but he's kind of a little bit of a bully in many ways, but he's definitely a leader, so he would fall into this Moses leadership style for sure.
And so in working with this kind of person, how does it play out?
Well, usually I just have to figure out ways to do what he wants and try to balance it with our needs here, and we don't always do what he wants, but we try to, because there's financial strings attached, so we have to kind of we have to be the Joshuas behind the Moses.
That's an excellent way to put it. That's great. And oftentimes, fortunately or unfortunately, we do have these financial philanthropists who can sort of say, if you want my money, this is the way we need to be doing it. And there have been times when JCCs have chosen not to take the money. And sometimes that's okay, and sometimes we do it and we take the money and we bring those people on board and embrace what they have to offer as well, and, as you said, kind of work around it. That's great. Who else? One more example of a modern-day way of working. Lynn, I see your hand up. Is that a new hand up, or is that from before? Yep, she took her hand down. Anybody else have a story about modern leadership?
So, Joy, I wanted to offer something.
Sure.
I don't have a lot, but I know some people that work at Google, and I'm not sure exactly internally if there's, someone at the top or the executive that is at all Moses, but I know from a lot of people that work in middle management and in the creative areas, there's a lot of empowerment for people to work in teams and to take leadership in creating innovation. So I almost see Google as one for-profit company example where some Joshua models or Joshua-like models are taking place, that they feel like there's an empowerment on their own to lead and to innovate, and that to share as much of that mantle with as many people as possible in order to make that innovation possible, as opposed to being kind of just told what to do and following the fold in an absolutist or top-down way. So people can disagree with that. I think of Google in terms of a modern example.
Yes, and a little bit closer to JCC Association is the philanthropist and business owner Seth Merrin, who is the funder behind the Merrin Teen Fellow Initiative here at JCC Association. And Seth truly believes that when he calls a group of people together, he really wants to hear from everybody around the table, and he does not want to stand on ceremony. He doesn't want titles to get in the way. He doesn't want hierarchy to get in the way. He might have an idea, but he values the 22-year-old's input as much as he values his right-hand partner's input, and it certainly seems to be working for him and his organization, so it's something that we can probably learn from as well. Okay, let's move to the next slide. And Mark had mentioned Peter Drucker. Leaders have followers. Peter Drucker is a great management professor who decided a long time ago, he's not of the 2014 era, but he's been around for a very long time, and he thought that management is a liberal art, and infused management advice with interdisciplinary lessons from history, society, psychology, sociology, culture. He also believes strongly that all institutions, including those in the private sector, have the responsibility for the whole of society, which is an interesting way to think about when you're thinking about a manager, but it certainly relates to the work that we do at a community center when we do have the needs of the community that we have to take care of. And Drucker wrote in 1973 in his Management Tasks, Responsibilities, and Practices that it is modern society, there is no leadership group but managers. If managers of our major institutions and especially of businesses do not take responsibility for the common good, no one else can or will. So that's an interesting way to think about it, and he truly believes that leaders need to have followers. If we look more modern at Harvard Business Review, there was an article a few years back that talked about no leader is perfect. The best ones don't try to be. They concentrate on honing their strengths and find others who can make up for their limitations. And I think this is a really great lesson for all of us, as whether we're just leaders of our departments or we're leaders of an entire agency or we sit on committees. The best leaders surround themselves with people who complement their skills and don't duplicate them. We find that JCCs who are successful have a wide base of knowledge across their JCC professionals, where the exec and the COO or the assistant executive director have different skill sets and they complement each other. They can work collaboratively. They certainly have the same vision and mission in mind of the JCC, but they can also challenge each other's thinking and have lots to add to each other so that they can share the leadership. And then, regardless of your political views and what you thought of the Reagan era, Ronald Reagan is quoted to say, "The greatest leader is not necessarily the one who does the greatest things. He is the one that gets the people to do the greatest things." And I think in many ways, if we think about this, as department heads, as assistant executive directors, that's really what it's all about. It's about allowing our staff to have the ability to grow and shine and put their mark on something. And sometimes we find that understanding that we need to have people, we see leaders that dictate and those people that don't want regard for their opinion or expertise. But then why have those people on staff if we're not going to listen to them and care about them and nurture them to have their own opinions and grow? So I really liked that quote about Ronald Reagan. We're going to jump to the next slide here, and we're talking about inspiring a shared vision. And Mark is going to take us through this multi-lens viewership that he's got here up on the screen.
Well, we're actually going to have you do some individual reflection in a couple of minutes. But I wanted to just think about some of the main points and discussions that we've had in JELI thus far and how it relates to this key discussion, and specifically thinking about the last 3 webinars before this one. And David really introduced the idea of hospitality and welcoming people in October, and we touched on it in New York. And I think in linking that to sharing leadership and thinking about this Joshua model, even though the Moses model is what first comes to mind, as Lynn was pointing out, how can I or we welcome my partners into every meeting and every discussion? That it's not only about making sure that everyone around the table can support the vision, so you're a better leader if you're the leader, but how can that also link to our general goal of being hospitable and being welcoming and being warm as JCCs and really hopefully all Jewish organizations that try to do. So we found that a really close connection between the hospitality conversation and this one. In addition, we spoke at length, and you guys have written fabulous Pew Study memos to talk about the role of identity in our work and the role of multiple identities in our work. And as we think about sharing leadership and trying to be collaborative and getting people involved, we have to know our audience, and we have to know all the different identities that are coming into the boardroom or to the programming meeting or to the event at your JCC. So when we think about the people that we're supervising or the people that are our lay leadership, who are they and what are they bringing to the table, and what's the relevance of their identities when we're trying to work with them collaboratively and incorporating a certain style of leadership. And last but not least, in regards to kind of linking to past discussions, we just came off the discussion of multipliers and diminishers as a way of thinking about communication. If we truly want to be a strong leader, whether we're going to be top-down or whether we're going to be collaborative, and we're not trying to espouse either, but we're trying to show the benefits and challenges of both, how can we always be doing it in a way that is multiplying our opportunities and using language that is strengthening our position as leaders or as organizations and not diminishing? And certainly when it comes to the Joshua model, there's a lot of this invitation, there's a lot of this multiplying. So I encourage you at your work or in your upcoming conversations in a couple of minutes to think about these linkages and to think about each of these webinars as independent discussions, but also as linking all together. And we're going to do a lot more of this linking in a couple of weeks, but I wanted to put this out there now. Quick individual reflection before we do a partner chat, and I think we touched on this a little bit already. When is a top-down approach best in our work? And Moses might not be just top-down, but for the sake of simplicity, in your role at your JCC, when is a top-down approach best, and when is a collaborative approach best? I would actually ask if, as you do this reflection, to maybe type something up in chat, and we'll read some responses out. someone is burning to share something out loud, you can do that too and raise your virtual hand. Julie, I think you were going to introduce this slide. I'm sorry if I took that away.
Quite all right. But I'm wondering where everybody is. This is the interactive part, folks. Come on.
Joy, I thought we were supposed to be writing in chat.
Yes. Are you?
I'm about to.
Aha,
Oh.
we got him. Okay. So
All
I'm
right,
just going to read a couple of them out. Thank you, Carol. So top-down in a crisis and collaborative when you're programming or even have time, which I think, interestingly, brings up the issue of time and whether that will dictate whether we're going to be in a top-down approach or a collaborative approach. Top-down is great when you have a quick, supportive decision that needs to be made. Would say the top-down approach is best when giving direction in order to be clear, and I think that's something that Adam touched on before, knowing when to be absolute and knowing when to kind of have wiggle room. Joy, if you want to do the next few.
Top-down is crisis management, and collaborative is programming and future planning or visioning. Collaborative is when you need support for a new initiative. Absolutely. Collaborative is a fantastic way to develop new programming or improving older programs. Yeah, the more buy-in we can get on improving developing new programs and improving old programs is great. I think collaborative approach is best when you want to when you want the maximum buy-in for a program or an idea. Collaborative brings perspective to the table, and it achieves goals. Collaborative is best when we are trying to create a shared vision. Top-down, when reviewing or introducing an overview. Collaborative in all the planning stages. Top-down when executing decisions, particularly when under pressure. Yes, and all of these are very, very important in the way that we run our everyday work at JCCs, and I think that if nothing else, this whole discussion will make us take a little bit of a pause, because sometimes as leaders, we get all wrapped up in all the things that have to happen in our day-to-day life, and sometimes it's a lot easier for us to just, bang out an email and say, this is what we're doing, and take it upon yourself and expect everybody to follow, rather than having meetings and those collaborative discussions that might take a little bit longer. But if nothing else, hopefully this will let us take a little bit of pause and see who else can we bring in the conversation and the discussion, and what would be the gain out of it. And I'm sure that we can all agree in many cases we would gain from taking a breath and taking a step back and inviting other people into the discussion so that we can collaborate with them. Deborah reminds us that top-down is best when there's a fire to put out, and that's absolutely true. Fire, safety, anything like that where quick decisions need to be made. Go ahead, Mark.
And I was just going to say, as I'll transition to the next slide, that you might see a comment that one of your cohort fellows or your cohort members are sharing, and you might disagree with that. This is not a absolute, if you will, of agreeing when is best to use a top-down or when is best to use a collaborative. So I encourage ongoing discussion about the best approach during certain situations.
Great.
So we're going to give you about 15 minutes to break out into chat, into partners, and I'll show you those partners again in a minute. There is, a golden rule of treat the ways you'd want to be treated, and I think there are different ways these golden rules have been put into certain text, Jewish tradition checks, including Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers. So again, I apologize. I was getting the Hebrew together before the fire drill, but we wanted to throw three texts out there. Ben Zoma, one who is wise, one who learns from everyone. And Rabbi Hillel, don't judge a fellow man until you are in his place. And again, Rabbi Hillel, what is hateful to thee, do not do to thy fellow man. That is the whole law. The rest is commentary. And these are, one translation of these Hebrew texts. We're going to have you break out into partners for about 10 to 15 minutes. Examine these three short texts. We'll put them back on the screen. and discuss both your initial reactions and your challenge over the course of your discussion. And partners is come up with one golden rule, kind of a JELI golden rule, for how can you effectively share leadership. And that is not to say that you have to be Joshua model or Moses model or another model, but in this idea of knowing that leadership has to be shared in some respects, what would be your golden rule? And on the flip side of our breakout, we'll share our golden rules with each other. So these are your partner groups. There are some changes to this. Amy, I think you're on. So Amy and Lynn can stay together. I think everyone is on this list except for Joni. And I'm going to ask Stephanie if you can partner with one of our wonderful advisors. I think we actually have all of them on except for Ronit. So I was going to ask Shelley, because you don't normally work with Shelley. Shelley, if you would be so kind to partner with Stephanie and have a 10 or 10-minute conversation, either over chat or preferably you can exchange cell phone numbers or phone numbers and chat for 10 minutes. But other than that, the partners are as they are. And I have 1:14 here on the Eastern time zone. So take about 13 minutes, 15 minutes, and by 1:30 we should come back together and have our group discussion. So again, these are your partners. If you don't have cell phones, exchange them over chat. And then I'll put these 3 quotes up, and then we'll talk more about our respective golden rules.
Stephanie, give me your phone number right now. Or can she? Too late. I don't have her phone number.
Shelley, using the chat function, you can exchange phone numbers on WebEx.
Okay.
All right, so we'll see you all in about 15 minutes. I think there's someone that has their away music on. They realize it's great. If you realize it's great, if not, we'll listen to it during the breakout. All right, so for those of you watching this on recording, we are in the middle of our breakout exercise where we're having partners connect and talk about the 3 texts that are on the screen and how they relate to our discussion of sharing leadership and the models of leadership we've been discussing. And after they're talking about initial reactions, we're going to have each of our partner groups come up with a golden rule for us to all share. So we'll be doing that for another 10 minutes or so. And just another announcement to those of you on recording, we are in the middle of the breakout partnering, where each of our partners are examining the 3 texts on the screen, discussing their initial reactions in relation to our sharing leadership discussion, and together each are going to come up with a golden rule to share with a larger group about how we effectively share leadership. So we should be getting together in about 7 minutes or so, so feel free to fast forward on the recording to get to that. Okay, folks, if you can hear my voice, it's 1:27, almost 1:28. Start wrapping up your conversation. We're going to get back together in just a couple of minutes. Joy will give you another warning on chat, and looking forward to hearing all about your conversations.
I've got 1:30.
Okay, if everyone wants to text or just send a quick chat to Joy, the Davidson School of JTF, to just say that you're back, that would be great, so we can get started.
We're going to call on each group, so you don't need to type it in. Give one more minute for those who haven't checked in yet. Just waiting for a few more groups to let us know that they're here. Type us a note that you're here. Okay, we're going to ask everybody once again to put yourselves on mute. Thanks for coming back. I hope you had a good conversation. What we're going to do is, rather than have everybody type it in, we're going to, Mark has drawn on the screen for us his rendition of tablets of the Ten Commandments. And so he is going to type as we talk. And the first group who already typed in something was Carol and her partner, and I'm going to call on Carol to tell us what you said. So, Carol, can you unmute yourself?
Yep, I'm unmuted.
Okay, go ahead.
We thought about how the first two, I don't know what you call them. What do you call them? Peer KFOs. That's what they are. They're peer KFOs. We responded to those immediately without question. We have to think about the third one a little. And what we decided to do is figure out sort of I think it's called an anagram. I don't know, I could be wrong, where each letter is a piece of what we're talking about. So we decided we were going to ask everyone to rest on their laurels, and their laurels would be listen, in this order: listen, ask questions, using unrelenting respect, respond respectfully, engage your team, and always leave room for the game changer, because your mind can be changed by anyone on your team.
Nice job. If you did that in 10 minutes, I can imagine what you could do if we gave you a half hour. That was great.
Yeah, probably not much more. But okay, bye.
Thank you both. I see Mark has started to put some things up on the screen, so take a look at the screen. Who is number 2? If you were the creator of number 2, if you and your group partner were 2, could you chime in and tell us about treat others the way you want to be treated, not the way that they would treat you?
So Monica and I were talking a little bit about kind of the golden rule and the twist on the golden rule of not thinking about it in terms of how you would want to be treated, how would you want or expect them to treat you, but only how you would want them to treat you.
Okay. I like that.
Does that make sense?
I think so. You want to say more?
If I could come up with more, I would definitely say more.
Monica, okay.
You can add.
Monica, you want to add something?
Sure, I'm happy to add something. We kind of focused on trying to remember to put yourself in the other person's shoes, like think from their perspective, rather than continuously arguing out a point that you're right and they're wrong. Try to not necessarily agree, but say, I may not agree with you, but I want to understand where you're coming from. Try to remember that other people who come from different backgrounds, and you need to remember to try to understand where they're coming from and trying to butt heads continuously.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that. Thank you. Okay, which partnership was willingness to be flexible? Leadership styles depend on the situation.
So that would be Deborah and myself.
Okay, Sarah, go ahead.
Okay, so we talked about, we definitely connected to the first two texts that we read. And then our conversation was about the comments that we all posted after watching Rabbi Kenneth Brander. And I said that one of my struggles is, finding a leadership style that's so either Moses or Joshua. I think that there are leaders out there that are so one-dimensional, but when I was reading everybody's comments, something that stuck out to me was a lot of us feel that we collaborate. And there were some comments that I related to but we're looking for more of a Moses when we are looking for supervision. We talked that I feel that a strong leader is like a Moses, that you have the vision, but in order to see that vision come to fruition, you need to have the attributes of a Joshua of collaboration. It was really just, it's not so either or, it's got to be a little bit of both and definitely dependent upon the situation.
Mhm. Okay. That's great. And I also think, echoing what you're saying, that when we're looking to a supervisor for leadership, direction, visioning, whatever it is, we don't want somebody that's sort of like wishy-washy, always throws it back at us and says, well, what do you think we should do? There are times when we do expect that the leader above us or somebody that we're working with will have that vision and will be able to give us the insight into the direction we should go in. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, which group is the different situation require different responses? Good leaders have wisdom to know the difference.
That was Amy and me.
Okay, Lynn, go ahead. Thanks.
Well, as we were talking, I kept hearing the serenity prayer going through my head. The God grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think I think flexibility is key. Like the previous group just noticed, it's acknowledging that different situations will require different things of you. And I would grant all of us the wisdom to know the difference. And I guess that's, to know when to do what.
Great. That's a good way to think about it. Thank you. How about for number 5? Let your ideas flourish through meaningful listening, sharing, engagement, and collaboration. Who's that?
Hello?
Jessie, how are you?
Hi. This was Rochelle and mine. We had quite a discussion about all the different ideas, but one thing that we focused on was often in shared leadership, there's less ownership over whose ideas the ideas actually are. When you're collaborating, there's less room to sort of claim those ideas, and you need to kind of be okay with that. And that was something that we felt was both evident in the video in terms of changing after the rabbi's child passed away, that they were very active in engaging a change, though they didn't necessarily get the credit in the end.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really very interesting point, and I'm not so sure, as in their case, I'm not so sure that you actually need to get the credit as long as you see that things have moved forward and that it's successful.
Right.
Great. Thank you. Okay, who did number 6? Learn from others, be willing to compromise, show empathy, and welcome others in collaboration to work towards shared goals.
That would have been myself and Jennifer.
Okay, Adam.
Kind of brought up a little bit how I think in management school they should they actually combine with the psychology department because it's a lot about getting people to work together. sharing off of one of the phrases that talked about, listening to other people and how we've talked previously today about having smarter people in the room. That's all well and good, but you've got to be able to work together, and so that's why the part of our phrase talking about collaboration we thought was extremely important to put in there, because not everyone knows everything, and we've got to be able to, as we said there, learn from others, be willing to compromise these, and welcome others in collaboration to work towards the shared goal.
Good. Okay. Let's see, we have a couple more up here. Recognize and take advantage of each person's strengths to find success. Which group is that?
That was myself and Natalie. We talked about a lot of different things as it pertained to the text. I think we took those texts and thought of them as characteristics of a leader. We talked about things like people say, get the right people on the bus if they can't, if they don't want to be on the bus or fill the right seat, get rid of them, things like that. So we kind of came up with this idea that as a leader, being able to recognize both the strengths and the weaknesses of people and being able to put those to use and getting everybody involved is how you're going to find success within your team. And if you build a team of people who also want to do that same thing, you're all going to learn from each other.
Great. I think that sort of encompasses everything that we've been talking about all morning, so that's great. Okay, we have a couple more groups left. Lead as if you want to follow that leader. Also, listen first and build consensus. Which group is that?
That was me and Shelley. It's Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie.
Good, okay. I'm sorry, I'm on the phone instead of video. Shelley and I talked a lot about what we've already mentioned a little bit, but really taking a look at the three texts and pulling out kind of what that leader is or defines as, and remembering within yourself, make it a focus on the good and not necessarily the bad, and be that person who you would want to follow.
Good. And I think that reflects back to what we heard with Claire and Monica about thinking about the way that you would want to be treated. This also thinks about the leader and how you want to lead. Okay, I'm getting a lot of feedback from somebody. Not sure if your phones are all muted. And then we have Jen and Howie. Everyone's opinion matters. Who wants to speak with that?
I'll speak.
Okay, Howie.
We looked at the quotes, and obviously one of the ones about not walking in somebody else's shoes, don't make a judgment until you walk in their shoes. You really can never walk in anybody's shoes because everybody has a little bit different of situation. And so you really need to sort of listen to what everybody has to say because you can't truly judge people. So we just sort of figured that everybody has their own opinion. Doesn't mean you have to take it, but everybody's opinion really matters, and you should view that before you as a leader.
Good. That's a great reminder. Thank you. And for number 10, we've asked that Stephen Rod chime in. You can unmute yourself, and Mark has put up on the board here. Remember to always say thank you for your hard work. It is you that make things happen.
I took a gamble with this, and I won. I wish there was some great prize here because this summarizes a number of the other golden rules, particularly learn from others, show empathy and welcome others, and recognize and take advantage of each person's strengths to find success. But then you must remember not to claim the success for yourself, but to make sure you thank and acknowledge all of that input and work from the other people. So you always want to remember to always say thank you for your hard work. You made this happen.
Thank you for reminding us that, Stephen. It's very important that we do that with our coworkers, with our supervisors, with our board lay leaders. Always thank them for the work that they're doing. Okay, we're going to skip to the next slide now. Thank you, everybody, for your input on these. We're going to type them up and actually be able to send them out to everybody because it's really a very wonderful way of thinking about the 10 Commandments of what we believe our JELI work is. And as you can see, Mark put up this slide, this beautiful picture of the collaborative team of the JELI staff, Mark and myself, and Jeff and David, and then our advisors, who the 9 of us all got together over the summertime and had a sort of, shut down, closed door, full day meeting on planning JELI, and we continue to be very collaborative in the work that we do, and are always talking with each other and bouncing ideas off of each other and challenging each other. Somebody has a good idea, somebody wants to add to it, somebody else thinks that it's not such a great idea, and that has been the way that JELI has evolved over the last cohort as well as this cohort, and I think it's really nice to see how we can all work together like this. Mark, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I want to ditto everything that you just said. It's perhaps a little self-promoting to put us as the ideal collaborative leaders, but we really believe in the approach that we do. And I also think it's important to recognize not just the photo, but the three logos that are below. While JTS and JCC are separate organizations and have different, sometimes overlapping, sometimes not overlapping interest in JELI. Really from the beginning of talking about what JELI could be before it was even called JELI, it really has been a true partnership. And I think when you work in partnership organizations where the top is always 2, Chancellor Arnie Eisen and Alan Finkelstein don't report to one person, it sort of has to be a Joshua. There really can't be Moseses out there. So there might be opportunities or right times to be a Moses, but in the case of putting JELI together, it really has to be a partnership between 2 organizations and the organization that helps support it. So Jim Joseph Foundation is another Joshua-like partner. You are also a partner, too, as JELI Fellows, because I think we also learned together from you and put this program together based on what you're looking for as well.
Yes, that's a good thing.
Joy's going to have one more chance to share a couple of closing thoughts right before I end, but I do want to thank Joy now for taking the lead and putting together this really wonderful content part of the webinar. Truly a fabulous partner to work with. And want to take the last 10 minutes or so to talk about next steps. Obviously, we're going to be together for 4 days in just under 2 weeks. And just to reiterate that we're going to revisit the concepts of shared leadership really right from the get-go on Monday. If you had a chance to look at the retreat booklet that I sent out this morning, and we'll go over that again soon. You'll have plenty of time to look it over the next couple of weeks. We're going to be meeting with a lot of great people and seeing a lot of great things in Birmingham, and that's going to start with meeting with Betsy Weinbat Lynch, who's the executive director of the JCC, and Richard Friedman, who's the director of the Birmingham Jewish Federation. They work in a small Jewish community and have to share leadership on a daily basis in order to meet their shared goals. So we're going to hear from them. It's sort of a model or a case study and what we can learn from that. Some reminders. We are just under 2 weeks away from being in Birmingham, and we're sending you some pre-readings that I'll highlight in a moment. We're not providing any other assignments, no memos to write or things to put on the Google site, because you're already going to give us your pre-project 2-paragraph proposal to us next week, and you should also bring that to Birmingham. But there are a decent amount of things to review, and actually, let me stay on that slide. I'm going to share my desktop for a quick second. And you received this morning the JELI Retreat, which might make a change or two before we print it, but this is pretty much what, kind of like we had for New York, your go-to booklet for everything you need to know logistically and programmatically for the week that we have ahead. Feel free to look at it on your own. If there's any questions, please email me. Many people looked at it, but if there's errors or things that are typos or confusion, please let me know so I can clarify. I'm going to skip over to page 5. This is our list of pre-readings and assignments. The only pre-assignment is the 2-paragraph project proposal, but then we're going to ask you to do several different readings, viewings, or listenings. None are very long. One is a TED Talk. That'll really connect to our conversation today and our first conversations on Monday. There's an article on experiential education. There are some sheets about the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute and the history of desegregation in Birmingham that are going to be posted on the Google site by the end of the day. And there's also a highlight link and also a link to an audio sermon of Rabbi Milton Grafman. We're going to be visiting Temple Emmanuel, which is an historic synagogue in Birmingham, and be meeting with Rabbi Jonathan Miller, who he was the junior rabbi, I believe, when the senior rabbi was, well, not when Milton Grafman gave the sermon, but Milton Grafman was a senior rabbi when Jonathan Miller joined the temple. But back in 1963, Milton Grafman gave this really powerful audio sermon right after there was the bombings in Birmingham in 1963. So that's gonna weave into our conversation a little bit of the civil rights narrative. So it's an audio and also highlights to look at. And then for our discussions on middle management that Stephen Rod's going to lead, we have an article from you. Steve and I posted the 1980 version, but we're going to try to get the 2005 version to everybody within the next few days. But it's already a relevant document to look at. And also just to look at some of the websites of the places that we'll be going to familiarize yourself. Feel free to look at both the 2-page schedule and then the expanded schedule. You'll take a look at our goals and our objectives, some nice photos. For those of you that are JELI caregivers, I'll give you assignments before we get there as to what we hope for you to help out all of the team, and specifically Joy and me, throughout each day that you're assigned. And then you'll notice at the end, I know I'm skipping ahead, we have bios of many of the people that are coming. You'll get more bios, places where you can go to restaurants on your own. We're going to provide many copies of this session reflection handout. Sometimes we'll have time to fill it out together. Sometimes you should do it on your own. But every single session, though it connects, each one has a specific goal to it and learnings from it. So we'll encourage you to fill out this form or do other similar reflections to get the most out of the retreat. And we'll explain the cohort challenge thing when we get to Birmingham. So if there's any questions, please let me know. Please take your time to look through the retreat, booklet. I've also emailed out. Let me stop sharing my desktop. I also emailed out room assignments. Thank you for most of you for getting back to me. Confirming your flight plans. We'll be emailing out the week before if a lot of people are flying in at the same time, so you can share cabs. And other logistical information. If there's anything I missed, please let me know. But we are so excited. We're all going to pray that there's no polar vortex coming to do another ice storm in Birmingham like there's been the last few weeks. Hopefully we don't have to think about any contingency plans. We're hopeful for the weather outlook. And other announcements. Continue to have conversations with your advisors. Some of you have already had your site visits. From your advisors. If they haven't yet been scheduled, make sure that they're scheduled between now and July. Advisors should also be in touch with me. And then there's the guiding document. 3 of our advisors, Shelley, Jane, and Stephen, will be leading sessions, so they'll also be in Birmingham. So we encourage you to meet with your advisor during the free time while in Birmingham if they're there. We're going to start at 2:30 p.m. on March 3rd. Hold on one second. And take the bus from the hotel to the JCC. So you'll all have my cell and Joy cell. If you're at all running late from your flights or delayed, let us know so we can coordinate. And then, yes, again, hotel room assignments and flight plans will be sent to you
Mark,
today.
When you send the flight plans so we know who's going to arrive at the same time, if you can add some phone numbers to that of the same time so we can connect, or a place that we could meet. We can do it ourselves if you give us the phone numbers, but if there's like a central place near the cab stand, who should meet where, it would help us and we can save some dough.
Great, Shelley.
Yeah, thank you, Shelley. We'll make sure to provide the appropriate information so you can coordinate.
And it looks also like Claire has put out that she will be driving and could be at the airport around 10:30 if anyone needs a ride. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you. So again, we will see you on Sunday. I'll probably email 1 or 2 more times max between now and then. And just a reminder about the JELI project as you're putting together your 2-paragraph proposal. This does not set your idea in stone. It's just an idea that you can bring to us so we can work through it with you, work through the advisors. We're going to have a project workshop in Birmingham to talk more about it. But the goals, as the guiding document says, is to add value to your JCC, demonstrate your growth and learning in JELI, and relevant to your work and personal goals. I would add that it should also be something that you know that you can do, that you should have a conversation with your supervisor or exec to make sure that whatever you want to do is feasible and you'll be supported by the JCC. And of course, we can all support you in that. Joy, before we get to the last slide, I'll position it, last slide, but position it back to you just to say any final words.
Thank you. I also wanted to note that we have, as we know, we have Shelley on the line, and we also have Jane, I just wanted to give each of them 60 seconds if there was something that they wanted to add, and whether it was something about the Ten Commandments or leadership styles. If you have a thought that you want to add, it's always nice to hear from our advisors.
Not at this time for me. I think it was a great session.
Thank you, Shelley.
I too think it was a great session, as I typed you. I think you did a great job of modeling great leadership. So thanks. Great webinar.
Great. And I think Jennifer is with us as well.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are up, and we see you.
Snow day over here in Westchester. So, Yasser Koch, Joy, that was great. That was great modeling of it. One thing that struck me from what, from the talk and the rabbi discussing his wife's situation and the incredible work that she and other mothers like her did to change the law, was that, and what he noted afterwards, that nobody, like, you won't find her Googled anywhere. And I think that sometimes, while that does seem to be an ideal to be able to collaborate and really enact change, I think sometimes in like the more of the microcosm of our world, sometimes there does need to be a greater acknowledgement of the different people involved as well, to be able to go to the next step, either for, and it's not just about self-advancement, it's about moving ahead, whatever the agenda or whatever the issue or project or program is. Sometimes there does need to be individual recognition, and I think Steve mentioned that in the particular thank yous at the end. So I think that while the great collaboration is fabulous, I do think there does need to be some kind of shout out to the particulars in order to move along either the person in their leadership or the project.
Okay.
That is the case. Yes, sure. That was just a
thought. That's great. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so as we've seen over the last 90 minutes or so, leadership is a very important skill. It's a skill that at times we need to check our ego at the door. We need to realize that while people are looking up to us, we don't have all the answers. There are really smart people in the room, and we can learn from each other. Mark and I are always talking about how we learn as much from each of you as you probably learn from the webinars, and it's really a wonderful way to be collaborative while we're doing our work. It's something that needs to be shared. It needs to be practiced, and certainly as we move forward, that it's something that we should remember to do and take a pause before we act so that we can decide which kind of leader are we. Are we Moses or are we Joshua? And why is it important to switch between the two, and what sort of role should we take on? Stephen absolutely is reminding us that it's not at times to check our ego at the door. It's that always we really should check our ego at the door to be a really successful leader. So I would like to thank everybody for learning with us. I can't wait to see everybody in a couple of short weeks. Thank you so much, Mark, for helping put this together with all of your wonderful technology things that I don't have. And we'll see everybody in a few short weeks. Thanks so much for participating today.
I also want to thank Joy for getting us on time despite the surprise fire. And Monica, you wanted to give a sign to everybody. Oh, okay. Monica was going to put on the screen Happy Mardi Gras from the New Orleans JCC. Anyway.
There you go, guys. And I have a special treat when I get there, because it will be Lundi Gras when I arrive.
There we go. Happy Mardi Gras.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Feel free to sign off.
Bye-bye.
Hi, it was great. Thanks, Joy and Mark and everybody.
Joy, stay on for a quick second.
Okay.
Joy, if you want to press the record end button, I'll just say this is the end of our recording of JELI Cohort 2, Webinar 4, February 18th, 2014 on sharing leadership. This is the end of the webinar. So Joy, if you want to press the record, again, it'll stop recording.
I see pause. Let me see. I'm pressing the record